let's go ahead and travel back in time, shall we? Back to the year 1980, a time where most of you probably weren't even sperm yet, including me. Steven Leisberger, creator of the hit 80s film Tron, was commissioned to make 2 cartoon specials to broadcast along the 1980 Olympic Games. One was for the summer events and the other for the winter events. But unfortunately, only the winter special was aired at the time, due to us, along with several other countries, boycotting the summer games held in the Soviet Union. You see, since the Soviet Union was busy invading and bombing Afghanistan at the time, we didn't want any part of that, at least not directly, or unless it involved Charlie Wilson. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. Actually, I'll just stop here and tell you to go to, open up your history textbook and just look it up. Anyway, eventually both parts were edited together, shown on HBO and Showtime some years later, along with the Disney Channel for some reason. And then somewhere along the way, they made it onto VHS for all the furries to enjoy. I mean, who else would want to watch the furry edition of the Olympic Games? It's like saying, hey, let's go make the furry version of Star Search. Star Search is the old version of American Idol or X Factor. Animalympics. Furries go to the Olympic Games on their own little island. The events include boxing, hockey, pole vaulting, a gigantic multi-day marathon sprint, skiing, and so forth. Now, there aren't necessarily any central or main characters, or a traditional story driving this film. And by traditional story, I mean the basic hero's journey. And this is a series of broadcasted vignettes showing off the different events as combined summer and winter Animalympics. I was about to say Olympics, but then I realized no, that's the human version, apparently. Now, I wouldn't call this slice of life, more like mockumentary or something. And the thing is, with making slice of life, documentary, mockumentary, what have you, the way to make that engaging is to have, characters you care about, letting them grow, giving them arcs, having an interesting premise, a combination of all that, yada yada. I won't go too much into the premise right now, so let's just stick with the characters. I guess the most notable ones are Renee Fromage and Kit Mambo, since they both run a 1,000-kilometer long, multi-day long marathon. Renee is all about the sport and sacrificing life's other pleasures, as described in this song.
I see my goal ahead with nothing in the way.
And I guess Kit is the same way, although she doesn't really have the same song character development treatment. They do somehow develop a romance for each other over the course of however freaking long it takes to run a good 1,000 kilometers. Also, they got that booty. They're also the announcers for the Animalympics. They do an okay job at being characters, like this bird here, Barbara Warblers, who seems to unfortunately have Elmer Fudd syndrome.
I'm Barbara Warblers, and I'll be bringing you the story.
This girl has won every major competition on her rise to stardom.
Considering there were only 4 people total doing the voices for this movie, I'd say they do a pretty decent job. Then again, we are talking about 2 SNL actors and the guy that does Ned Flanders from The Simpsons.
4.5. Is that her score or the reading on the Richter scale?
Most of the humor for this film are puns, dry humor that might take you a couple of times to actually get it, or requires that you have a knowledge of late 70s and 1980s pop culture, which flew over my head, as I wasn't born until the 1990s. Now, some of you might not enjoy dry humor or puns, but if you do, you'll enjoy moments like this.
This reminds me of the old joke, how much does a Grecian earn, but you've probably heard it.
Bringing with it drama, joy, and sorrow. The thrill of victory, the agony of defeat.
Get it? 'Cause his feet hurt. Oh, there are lots of animal pun names too. Going back to René Fromage. See, he's a French goat whose last name is the French word for cheese. Goat cheese. Joey Gongalong, the kangaroo. A Joey is a young roo, if you didn't know. Maurice Bourdieu, literally a boar. Some of them are more creative than others. There's also a few slightly racist Asian stereotypes, like an orca named Oh No No No, I actually kind of like that, and a penguin named Bruce Quackimoto.
Thank you, Bruce. Too bad we don't know what that means.
Okay, scratch that. That's completely racist. Now, outside of the characters and the humor, the whole thing's a little bit boring, to be honest. You can tell they were having trouble making this out to be feature-length with some almost jarringly filler musical numbers. Wouldn't say they're as bad as Stella Luna, though. Might be on the same level. I don't know. The music itself is okay. I'm not a big fan of the late 70s soft rock pop sound they're going for, although this surf rock tune is pretty cool, even if it doesn't make sense in the context. Like, you see the otter, Dean Wilson, that's a Beach Boys reference if you didn't know, is diving off of a 1,000-meter long high dive thing, and he goes into, I guess, a state of nirvana? Or is that just how long it takes to dive that far? You would think that would kill a man, or furry in this case. In fact, most of these events are so cartoonishly extreme compared to the real-life events they're based on that, I mean, it kind of adds to the humor in some areas, like how hockey is literally a battlefield with explosions and casualties, but otherwise they kind of try too hard, I guess? That's how I would describe it. I think overall the whole vignette style of storytelling, just the series of random events that have a little bit of story connecting them, somehow that doesn't really click with me. And that's not saying I don't enjoy non-traditional storytelling. I mean, I like films like Memento and Pulp Fiction and other media that's not in a specific order, but still follows a storyline, suffice to say. Heck, even the avant-garde has got my attention, because I'm that artsy. Back to the film, the premise of what if furries competed in the Olympic Games could have been made a bit more interesting if it actually followed characters like Kit and Renee leading up to the games rather than showing their character development through song. Having actually seen this in the film, I didn't think that taking the standard normal hero's journey up to these events would have actually made the film better, but I'm kind of having a second opinion, believe it or not. Maybe it's just the way they structured the whole thing. Like, either way could work, technically. Also, I've heard some people say that this could be better split up as a series of shorts, or maybe just trimmed down to a single 8-10-minute episode altogether. But either way, just split them up between the summer and winter events and call it a day, at the very least. So how furry is this premise? Definitely furry if you ask me. All the characters are a good mix of human and anthro proportions, and aside from a bit of species confusion, all the athlete species do fit their sporting event. Now by that I mean there's a quartet of octopi, or squids, whatever, competing in bobsledding, and they win. Then a gator competes against a frog in a high jump and wins. I think the odd species pairing was intentional, kind of like how Zootopia played with species stereotypes. Then again, stereotyping was the main theme behind Zootopia, but I'll get into that when I actually do review Zootopia. And in previous reviews, I explained how in certain furry media you can replace the characters with humans and it wouldn't change anything, but honestly in this film, I'd say that making these furries into humans would just make a confusing and more boring cartoon about regular human athletes. And who wants to see that? And again, I mentioned the puns for the character's name, but their species do fit the country of origins for these animals as well. Weirdly enough, no actual country names are used, just continents. Are they avoiding copyright? Do they just want to avoid using the term Soviet Union? Because they replace that with Eurasia, and then America and Canada are combined into North America. I don't get it. Oh, and a small tidbit, there's an elephant character that wears a Russian lynx coat and hat. What? And it's played straight, as far as I can tell. So it's just strange that it's acceptable to wear another species' fur in a fashionable way when all your characters are furries. Just doesn't make sense to me. So overall, this was an interesting film to watch, and it has some rewatchability. And maybe you can watch it with your furry friends and maybe make fun of it, I guess. But I didn't find it that interesting. Animalympics gets a 2 out of 5 in terms of entertainment, but a commendable 4 out of 5 in furriness. I'm gonna put it right here on the furry scale, pretty close to Stella Luna, actually. Now, I mentioned that just because something is very furry doesn't mean it's entertaining or all that good. Again, Stella Luna was kind of a stale retelling of the original book form, and Animalympics was interesting, but not really something it's not really my thing. This has been Gregor going the distance reindeer with How Furry Is It? Stick around for more antler antics and furry analysis. So I don't have a lot to say during this epilogue. I might make a off-topic video later, sort of going over my criteria for something being furry. If you want that, go ahead and leave a comment below. Have a good day, and Texas Furry Fiesta is awesome.